With the recent playtest of Elden Ring Nightreign, things are really starting to take shape as to what kind of game this actually is, as well as what we're in for. Getting into Nightreign itself, I was originally very skeptical when it comes to these modern outings with online games, since most of them are very predatory in nature and are a shadow of what they used to be. I'm one of the most jaded people on the planet when it comes to the modern state of multiplayer focused games, which is why I thought I wouldn't get along with Elden Ring Nightreign. But what we actually ended up with was something that really took me back to a simpler time where online games were simple, unique experiences and weren't about some arbitrary rank system that changes constantly alongside following constant trends in an attempt to stay relevant. As well as businesses seeing their player base as nothing more than dollar signs, let's talk about Elden Ring Nightreign and why I think it will be a success both commercially and critically. From my time with the playtest, I really think Elden Ring Nightreign is going to be something amazing. There's a lot to be said about Nightreign's unique concept with what it does with the roguelike genre. The basic premise of Nightreign is that you have to survive 3 days on this land whilst killing enemies and leveling up alongside pillaging loot in order to get stronger. At the end of each day, you'll have to defeat a big boss in order to progress, and this is where the efforts of what you've been doing up until that point is put to the test. There's definitely this initial bit of whiplash that you have to get over, especially if you're used to the single player outings. Trust me, when I saw that we was landing in a random location on the map, I immediately thought of Fortnite, but once I got over this fact, I actually really started enjoying the way Elden Ring Nightreign implements this feature. What Nightreign really gets right is sure it takes ideas from other multiplayer focused games, but it implements it in such an innovative way. Look no further from this fact than with the team dynamic that Nightreign gets incredibly well. There's no obnoxious role system either, and you can even select the same teammates so anyone can contribute to the team whether intentional or not. What sets the characters apart from one another is that they all have different skills that they can use. The Wilder, for example, is definitely your standard pick with very traditional sort of moves, with this hookshot allowing them to close the gap between enemies alongside having this huge fireball that I really think might be nerfed in the future since it deals a really good bit of damage and comes out very quickly. The Guardian unit, however, is a lot more defensive oriented, having this move that allows them to cleanse nearby status elements alongside starting off with a shield, and is overall a really safe pick to choose. There's also the Duchess, who is very much derived from Bloodborne with the quickstep ability alongside having the option to veil their teammates to turn them invisible, allowing them to de-aggro from enemies. The final character we had the option to pick between was the Recluse, who is very much magic oriented. Now, something very interesting happened during my time with the playtest. I usually do not like magic builds in these games, but there was something about the Recluse that really changed my mind on this fact. And that's when it all clicked with me. Elden Ring Nightreign is very different from the single player outings that FromSoft has made. Mainly because in my case with the single player games, when you have a build you usually stick with it through the entire gameplay, but with Nightreign it really encourages using different weapons at all times, which is why I found I really preferred using magic in this game. When it comes to playing as the Recluse, you really have to look after your resource management when it comes to your FP. So having at least one melee weapon is a really good way to finish off enemies if you run out of magic. The Recluse's abilities are also very interesting. She has this move where she can take elements from the enemies and turn them into a spell, which can be used as a magic attack. Her other ability really helps the teammates out when it comes to a boss fight, and that's with her sigil that she can apply to a boss, allowing you to heal whenever you attack the enemy. One aspect that Nightreign does very interestingly as well is that each character has a different role that they can do, such as the Wilder having the more traditional Dark Souls centered role mechanic and the Duchess having the quick step from Bloodborne. The Recluse on the other hand has a very generous role, allowing them to make some serious distance with the enemy, which is really useful when you realise that they rely heavily on ranged attacks. This role really came in clutch, especially during boss fights where you had to revive your teammates since you could stay further away and hit them from afar. So far with this roster, I've really liked how each character feels unique, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Sekiro combat style character will perform in this game. Taking a step back and also seeing this as an online game, I'm really glad that FromSoft didn't rely too much on having one character contribute too much to the team. What I mean by this fact is that in Elden Ring Nightreign, as long as you're constantly dealing damage, you're contributing as much to the team as anyone else, and you don't have issues like most online centered games where some characters contribute way too much to the team but aren't as fun to play. A really good example of this fact is Mercy from Overwatch. No one actually wants to play her, but her healing output is so much better than any other hero in the game that it always makes her useful to have on the team at all times. So in the team dynamic for a lot of other online centered games, what you typically end up with is someone just standing there hitting heal for everyone else and not really having a good time, but in Elden Ring Nightreign everyone contributes to the team equally and every character is fun to play. I really get the impression that when this game was in development it was playtested to hell and back, since everything feels very much tight when it comes to how the team is implemented when it comes to damage numbers and damage output. No weapon or build felt particularly overpowered, and with my time with the playtest I never got past the second day. What I was trying to say is that for people who felt skeptical about whether this game will be balanced or not, let me just say it's very much From Software branded when it comes to the difficulty. What's also great is that this game isn't as tied so much to the team dynamic as you might think. There were moments during my time with the playtest where I would leave my team and try to tackle a boss solo, and typically I'd get away with it. I've also seen online that some people have already beaten this game with a solo run of all things, which is insanely impressive. I couldn't even get past the second day with a whole team of players, so people doing it by themselves is really impressive here. Not to mention that some of the randomness that can happen during the second day really caught me off guard at times.
There is no escape for thee, little pillager, bent on sacking the lands of gold.
Some issues I ran into were typical playtest problems, which is why they do these in the first place, but there was a lot of disconnects which would make things very unfair, and I kinda wish a CPU would join, since once you lose the 3-player dynamic, you really struggle to deal with boss aggro. I also had some really strange moments where certain players would see enemies but I wouldn't, so I'd kinda just stand there and not contribute to the team, since on my end there wasn't a boss there, but on their end there would be, so it would be kinda funny at times. But yeah, outside of those problems which are very apparent for playtests, which is why they do these in the first place, I really didn't have any issues on the technical level. Everything ran really smooth, and I'm very much surprised at the performance of this game, being how everything has to load so quickly. I'm sure this will be no easy feat to run on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One given this fact. One issue I found myself running into as well is that a lot of players didn't really know what to do. They'd kinda just stand there attacking regular enemies, and you want to run for the bosses, and sometimes I'd go towards a boss with other teammates for them to just go somewhere else, and at the end of the day, your main objective here is to fight the bosses since they give you better drops and loot. My first impression after jumping into a map and leveling up maybe once or twice is that once you see a boss you want to run straight to them. And this is since at the end of the day time is very finite, you want to make the most of every second that you can. Hopefully with the final build of this game, this point is better communicated to newcomers, since I've realised this a lot during my time with the playtest. Another aspect of this game that the developers really understood when creating Nightreign is that downtime is practically non-existent outside of looking where to go next. One aspect I've come to really hate about looter shooters and battle royale games is that there's just way too much downtime between finding weapons and shooting enemies. Seriously, with my small time playing games like Fortnite, there's so many moments where nothing happens and you're just waiting to find someone to shoot on the map. But in Nightreign, time goes by so quickly in the real world when playing this game as a result of its chaotic, fast-paced energy. Elden Ring Nightreign is such a condensed and quick experience that there's always something that you can do at any time. I will definitely argue that even though this game is more multiplayer focused, it's very much targeted towards the mainline audience in some respects. You'd think given the game's changing dynamic that they'd focus on targeting a more casual audience, but let me just say that this game is very much as hard as any other FromSoft title. To some degree, you could argue that Nightreign is even more harder than the mainline entry, since with the added team dynamic there are way more bosses that you fight than just one. If you go into this title expecting it being like the single player outings where when you would summon it would be very much one-sided, it's very much different here, and fights can be even more harder than those games. Even regular enemies that are brought into Nightreign are even more stronger from those titles since they no longer stagger as much as they used to. Okay, I've definitely been more positive than most people when it comes to this title, however there are some negatives that I'd like to address. My one big concern for this game is the initial learning curve and the map design like base game Elden Ring. It has a lot of moments where you can't progress and have to find an alternate path, which in a single player game makes sense. But here it can be very frustrating with the fast-paced nature, and some environments felt way too complex for a simple multiplayer map. Plus in some instances, finding your teammates was an absolute nightmare since I could never tell if they were above, below or on the same plane as me, and I couldn't find out if they were behind a wall or not at times. I hope that in the final build that the developers implement some kind of way to better tell where your teammates are on the map. Sometimes I'd be right next to my teammates and still have no idea where they actually are, which really isn't a good sign. I definitely think that this is some kind of growing pain when transitioning single player assets into a multiplayer centered game. But you could definitely argue to some extent that this will all come from just learning the map, so maybe given time with the final build I won't really have this issue anymore. Another issue that I'm personally not a huge fan of is with the fog mechanic, especially with how it's lifted from battle royale games. When you couple the fog mechanic having a really fast damage output on top of the complicated maps, there were a lot of moments where you just hit a dead end and die from the fog. Now, I understand why the fog mechanic exists in these games to begin with, since it gets rid of people idling or standing in one place for too long, but I feel like there needs to be some kind of way to counteract problems like this, maybe with some kind of mobility option. I do think though that given our time with the map that we played on, the more open areas were definitely way better than the more closed off spaces. And that's because it just complements the more fast paced nature of this map and kinda circumvents any problems I had with the closed off areas. Regardless of these more minor complaints, I definitely think that Nightreign is going to be something special, and let me just say this. Nightreign is anything but a simple cash grab designed to profit off of the rise of live service games. As someone who is very jaded and negative when it comes to online centered games, this title is the shake-up that we finally need. In a gaming environment that was once pioneered with interesting and unique ideas, it's become nothing more than repetitive slop in the modern age. In a sea of companies putting out half-assed attempts in order to push profits each year by squeezing the player for everything that they're worth, they take once ambitious ideas and ground them into a shadow of their former self, to the point where the player base becomes so conditioned that they think that bringing back loot boxes is a good idea. This scene is genuinely awful for any game with a shred of passion nowadays. Which is why we need interesting, unique ideas like Elden Ring Nightreign to really succeed in today's modern gaming climate. And no, this video isn't a negative take on the state of modern gaming, since single player outings are still as good as they've ever been. But when it comes to multiplayer outings, I think that we deserve way better. Even some of the biggest developers of single player titles like Nintendo seem to have this low standard when it comes to making multiplayer releases. Look no further than with Splatoon, a series back in 2015 that was very innovative, but nowadays seems to be less risky and interesting with each sequel. I'll spare this rant from going on too long. I just hope that games like Nightreign succeed, since this scene definitely needs a shake-up. I just hope that it can survive the multiplayer climate and garner a decently sized fanbase. This game is looking incredibly promising, with the developers even putting out a questionnaire looking for more feedback on how they can improve the title. There's definitely passion behind Elden Ring Nightreign, and I really hope that it sticks the landing when it releases on May 30th. But what did you think of Elden Ring Nightreign, or the modern state of multiplayer gaming for that matter? I'm curious. Also, any feedback on this video would be appreciated. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.